Liberty Hall. Liberty Hall, one of the oldest brick structures in Frankfort, Kentucky, has a history that dates back to 1786 when General James Wilkinson first purchased the land. Wilkinson laid out the entire town, even naming streets after his friends, before selling the 4-acre site that includes Liberty Hall to local resident Andrew Holmes. In 1796, Holmes sold the land to Senator John Brown, who began construction on a home shortly thereafter, even though he spent much of his time on business in Philadelphia. The hall, built from clay fired on site, has stood the test of time and is now known for its architectural and historical significance. In 1835, John Brown divided the property between his sons. His elder son, Mason, inherited Liberty Hall, while his younger son, Orlando, received the Orlando Brown House, which was designed by Gideon Shyrock, the architect behind the Kentucky State Capitol. The construction of the Orlando Brown House cost $5,000, a significant sum at the time. Liberty Hall is not just known for its history, but also for its hauntings, particularly that of the Gray Lady. This spirit is believed to be Margaretta Varick, the aunt of John Brown's wife, Margaretta Mason Brown. Margaretta Varick traveled from New York to visit her niece in Frankfort, but tragically passed away 3 days after her arrival on July 28, 1817. The exact cause of her death remains a mystery, with theories ranging from cardiac arrest to sheer exhaustion. The first reported sighting of the Gray Lady occurred in the 1880s when Mary Mason, a family member, awoke to find a tall woman in gray standing by her bed. This unsettling encounter repeated over several nights, with the figure vanishing before anyone else could see her. Since then, numerous family members and visitors have reported seeing the Gray Lady in various parts of the house, including on the staircase, in windows, and outside the building. Despite her eerie presence, the Gray Lady is said to be a benevolent spirit, watching over the house and its guests. Liberty Hall is home to other restless spirits as well. One such ghost is believed to be a Spanish opera singer who vanished during a grand party at the hall in 1805. Last seen walking towards the river in the garden, she never returned, leading many to believe she was abducted. Her spirit is often seen running through the gardens, her mouth open in a silent scream, forever trapped in the last moments before her disappearance. Another ghostly presence is that of a British soldier from the War of 1812. According to legend, this soldier fell in love with a cousin of the Brown family, but his feelings were not reciprocated. He has been spotted standing outside the hall, peering into the windows in search of his lost love. When he doesn't find her, he is said to cry and slowly walk away, a haunting figure of unrequited love. While the Orlando Brown House, located nearby, doesn't have the same reputation for hauntings as Liberty Hall, it's believed that the spirits of Liberty Hall occasionally cross over due to the proximity. 9. Waverly Hills Sanatorium. During the 1800s and early 1900s, tuberculosis, often referred to as the White Death, was a deadly and highly contagious disease that devastated communities across America. Louisville, Kentucky, had the highest tuberculosis death rate in the country by 1900, partly due to its low-lying, swampy terrain, which created ideal conditions for the disease to spread. In response, a hospital was built on a hill in southern Jefferson County in 1910, designed to help combat the disease. As the epidemic worsened, a new, larger facility called Waverly Hills was constructed, opening in 1926. This hospital was considered one of the most advanced tuberculosis sanatoriums of its time. But even so, many of its patients succumbed to the disease. With no effective medicine available, patients at Waverly Hills were treated with rest, fresh air, and nutritious food. The hospital's main purpose was to isolate those infected to prevent the disease from spreading further. Families were often torn apart, with parents and children being sent to the sanatorium with little contact with their loved ones. Some of the treatments used in the search for a cure were harsh by today's standards. Patients' lungs were exposed to ultraviolet light to try to kill the bacteria, and they were often placed in front of large windows or on open porches, even in freezing temperatures, to get fresh air, which was thought to help. Other treatments were more invasive and bloody. Some patients had balloons surgically implanted in their lungs, which were then inflated to expand the lungs, an experiment that often ended in disaster. Another procedure involved removing muscles and ribs from the chest to allow the lungs to expand more, but this was a last resort, and many did not survive it. Patients who died at Waverly Hills were discreetly removed from the hospital through a tunnel known as the body chute. This tunnel led from the hospital to the railroad tracks below, where the bodies were transported away by train. The idea was to protect the mental health of the remaining patients by hiding the number of deaths occurring at the facility. Waverly Hills closed in 1961, but was reopened a year later as Woodhaven Geriatric Sanitarium. There were numerous rumors of patient mistreatment and strange experiments during this period, some of which were found to be true. Electroshock therapy was widely used, and budget cuts in the 1960s and 1970s led to deplorable conditions, resulting in the facility's closure in 1982. Over time, Waverly Hills developed a reputation for being haunted. Stories of ghostly encounters began to surface, including sightings of a little girl running in the third-floor solarium, a boy playing with a leather ball, and a hearse delivering coffins. Other tales included a woman with bleeding wrists crying for help, doors slamming, strange noises, and the smell of freshly baked bread wafting through the kitchen, despite the room being in ruins. The fifth floor of the hospital, particularly room 502, is at the center of many legends. People have reported seeing shapes moving in the windows, hearing disembodied voices, and some even believe that tragic deaths occurred there, including suicides. This eerie history and the many tales of paranormal activity have made Waverly Hills a place of fascination and fear for those who visit or hear its stories. Number 8. Kentucky State Penitentiary. The Kentucky State Penitentiary, often referred to as the Castle on the Cumberland, or simply the Pen in Eddyville, is widely regarded as one of the most haunted places in Kentucky. This imposing and eerie structure has a long history, having been built in the mid-1800s, and it serves as both a maximum security and supermax prison. With its stone walls, razor wire, and foreboding atmosphere, the prison houses over 800 inmates at any given time, making it the second oldest prison in the state. Despite its beauty from a distance, up close, the penitentiary exudes a chilling aura that many believe is due to the countless dark stories and haunting experiences that have occurred within its walls. Former corrections officer Asher, who worked at the Kentucky State Penitentiary for years, shares some of these unsettling tales. He recounts working the midnight shift and seeing things that defy explanation. One night, he witnessed what appeared to be a figure hovering across the shower area. At first, he thought it was just a mirage, perhaps caused by heat, but then he heard a blood-curdling scream. Rushing to investigate, flashlight in hand, he found nothing. No one was there. These experiences, though unnerving, are just a fraction of the eerie occurrences reported at the prison. Asher also describes seeing reflections of inmates that weren't actually there. He recalls spinning around, expecting to confront a prisoner, only to find himself alone. The figure he saw dressed in old-fashioned black and white stripes, reminiscent of a vintage photograph. The haunting image left him with goosebumps, and even now, talking about it brings back that same sense of dread. The haunting tales of the Castle on the Cumberland are not isolated incidents. They are part of a larger, grim tapestry woven by the prison's dark past. Asher, who has written 2 books, Hauntings of the Kentucky State Penitentiary and Hauntings of the Western Lunatic Asylum, has many stories that he has never shared, some too graphic and horrific to recount. For those who have worked or spent time in the prison, the memories of these encounters remain locked away, much like the inmates who served their sentences within the penitentiary's walls. If you're enjoying this haunted tour, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. It's a free way to support the channel. We've got more haunted tales ahead and you won't want to miss a single one. If you have a state you'd like us to cover, drop it in the comments section below. Cemetery. Cave Hill Cemetery in Louisville, Kentucky, is a sprawling 296-acre Victorian-era national cemetery, known for its rich history and serene beauty. As the largest cemetery in Louisville, it's the final resting place for over 100,000 souls, including many notable Kentuckians, such as Colonel Harlan Sanders, Muhammad Ali, Bourbon Barons, and Meriwether Lewis Clark, the grandson of the famous explorer. The cemetery is renowned for its elaborate stone and bronze statues that adorn many of the graves, adding to the eerie atmosphere that envelops the site, especially as dusk settles in. The cemetery is a place of solemn beauty during the day, but as night falls, it takes on a more mysterious and unsettling character. Many visitors have reported seeing green orbs floating among the headstones at night, a phenomenon that has fueled countless ghost stories. One particularly enduring tale is that of a mysterious woman who appears at dusk, tenderly tending to the graves of children buried in the cemetery. Her ethereal presence has been noted by many, adding to the aura of mystique that surrounds Cave Hill. In addition to the visual apparitions, Cave Hill Cemetery is also steeped in the history of the Civil War, with many soldiers from both the Union and Confederate armies buried within its grounds. On quiet evenings, some visitors claim to hear faint whispers carried in the wind, as if the voices of those long gone are still echoing through the cemetery. These experiences have made Cave Hill a place of both historical significance and ghostly lore, attracting those who are drawn to its beauty as well as its haunting tales. Number 6. Camp Taylor. In 1917, Louisville won the bid to become the site of a significant military training camp, beating out several other nearby areas. Camp Zachary Taylor, named after the 12th U.S. president, was established on 2,000 acres of former farmland and included 1,500 buildings. The location was chosen due to its proximity to a large artillery range, which would eventually become Fort Knox. Surprisingly, Camp Taylor was considered a desirable assignment for many soldiers at the time. The camp offered decent accommodations, hot meals, and even laundry service, luxuries that were not always guaranteed in military life. However, despite these comforts, the camp was not immune to the harsh realities of disease. The flu pandemic of 1917 to 1918 struck Camp Taylor hard, with around 1,000 people dying within just a 3-week period. This tragic loss is often cited as the source of the paranormal activity reported in the area today. Residents of the Camp Taylor neighborhood, built on the former campgrounds, have reported seeing ghostly soldiers roaming the streets, seemingly lost in time. These apparitions are often seen marching in formation, as if still performing their duties from over a century ago. Some claim to have witnessed smaller groups of soldiers marching down the residential streets that now occupy the space where barracks once stood. In addition to the ghostly soldiers, there are also reports of a Victorian-era woman who appears at night, dressed in a blue dress with blonde hair. She is said to wander the streets of the old camp, and those who encounter her speak of her icy glare that sends chills down the spine. Her presence adds another layer of mystery to the already haunted atmosphere of the area. Though Camp Zachary Taylor was short-lived, and most of its structures were dismantled after World War I, with the wood repurposed into houses, the lingering spirits of those who passed through its gates seem to remain. Today, only a few remnants of this historic training camp survive, but the stories of its ghostly past continue to captivate and haunt those who live in the area. 5. Bobby Mackey's Music World. In 1850, a large slaughterhouse and meatpacking facility was built on the same site where Bobby Mackey's Music World now stands. This slaughterhouse served northwestern Kentucky and nearby Cincinnati, Ohio. At the lowest part of the building, a well was dug to hold the blood, guts, and waste from the slaughtered animals. Some researchers believe that after the slaughterhouse closed in the 1890s, the site became a hub for satanic cult activity. It's speculated that animals, and possibly humans, were sacrificed in ritualistic ceremonies near the well. One of the most infamous events associated with this site is the 1896 murder of Pearl Bryan, a 22-year-old woman from Greencastle, Indiana. Pearl's headless body was found in a field less than 2 miles from the slaughterhouse. Pearl had been pregnant, and her boyfriend, Scott Jackson, a dental student in Cincinnati, urged her to come to the city where he could arrange an abortion. Jackson and his roommate, Alonzo Walling, attempted the procedure themselves, but it went horribly wrong. In a desperate attempt to cover up the crime, they decapitated Pearl and left her body in the field. However, they overlooked the fact that Pearl's shoes were still on her feet, which led to her identification. Alonzo Walling, while awaiting his execution, vowed to haunt the area forever. Pearl's severed head was never found, and some speculate that it was used in one of the dark rituals that were rumored to take place in the slaughterhouse basement. The slaughterhouse was eventually demolished in the early 20th century, and the lot remained vacant until the 1920s, when a new building was constructed. This building became a casino, nightclub, and speakeasy during Prohibition. When Prohibition ended in 1933, E.A. Buck Brady purchased the building and named it the Primrose. The club thrived for over a decade until Cincinnati mobsters began pressuring Brady to sell. When he refused, violence ensued, with threats and fights breaking out in the parking lot. In 1946, after Brady drew a gun on a mobster named Albert Red Masterson, he was charged with attempted murder and was forced to leave the casino business. In the 1950s, the building reopened as a nightclub called the Latin Quarter. Johanna, a dance hall girl and the daughter of the nightclub's owner, fell in love with a singer named Robert Randall who performed at the club. When she became pregnant, she planned to run away with him, but her father forbade the relationship. Using his criminal connections, he had the singer killed. Distraught and heartbroken, Johanna poisoned her father and then took her own life in the basement of the building. Interestingly, Bobby Mackey's full name is Robert Randall Mackey, adding an eerie connection to this tragic story. By 1978, after a series of fatal shootings, the nightclub was shut down by local authorities. Despite its closure, the dark history and chilling legends surrounding Bobby Mackey's Music World continue to attract curious visitors and paranormal enthusiasts, all eager to experience the eerie atmosphere of this infamous location. Tavern. Built in 1779, the Old Talbot Tavern in Bardstown, Kentucky, has a rich history as the final stagecoach stop for travelers heading west, when Kentucky was still part of Virginia. Weary voyagers would arrive at the tavern on foot or horseback, seeking food, drink, and a place to rest for the night. Some visitors extended their stays, including notable figures like King Louis Philippe, who stayed long enough to have murals painted on the walls of his suite, and John James Audubon, who lived at the inn for a couple of years and paid his rent by gifting the tavern owner some of his treasured artwork. The notorious outlaw Jesse James also spent time here, and after one of many nights of drinking and card games, it's said that he fired a series of bullets into a wall, marks that can still be seen today. Today, the Old Talbot Tavern is not only known for its historical significance, but also for its ghostly legends. The most famous ghostly visitor is believed to be Jesse James himself. Another spirit often reported is the Lady in White, a ghostly figure who appears as an apparition. Guests and locals alike have reported seeing round balls of light, or orbs, moving around rooms at night, as well as sudden flashes of light with no apparent source. Other eerie occurrences include objects moving on their own, such as forks and glasses sliding across dining tables without being touched, and keys mysteriously disappearing from the front desk only to be found later down the hall. Furniture has been known to jump up and down for no apparent reason, and shadows have been seen emerging from dark corners, only to disappear once they step into the light. Strange sounds are also frequently heard, such as unexplained music, clocks chiming late at night, doors opening and closing on their own, and footsteps echoing throughout the building at all hours. Some have even heard knocking on doors, only to find no one there when they open them. An old piano has been heard playing by itself, and voices have been heard calling out from empty rooms. One particularly chilling story comes from a former bookkeeper at the tavern. One night, as she was closing up and heading upstairs to secure the day's earnings in the safe, she saw a man in a long coat walk across the top landing. At the same time, the cook also saw the stranger. Surprised, as no one else was supposed to be in the building, they both followed the man through several rooms, eventually seeing him go through the fire escape door. When they opened the door, they found him standing on the landing. He turned to face them, let out a hideous laugh, and then vanished right before their eyes. Weeks later, while watching a TV special, the bookkeeper saw a picture of Jesse James and realized with shock that it was the same face she had seen that night. Since then, the ghost has been known as Jesse James. The Old Talbot Tavern remains a popular destination for those seeking a glimpse. Perryville Battlefield. Perryville, a small town nestled in central Kentucky, carries with it a history steeped in tragedy. Known primarily for its significant Civil War battlefield, Perryville offers visitors a glimpse into the past while embracing a vision for the future. However, this charming town holds more than just history. It is also known for its ghostly tales, with stories of hauntings that span the town, battlefield, and surrounding buildings. Perryville was the site of the bloodiest Civil War battle in Kentucky, with over 7,600 soldiers killed, wounded, or missing. Today, the town and battlefield are preserved as historic sites, often hosting reenactments that bring the events of that time to life. While these reenactments are meant to educate and honor the past, some believe that the spirits of those who once lived and fought here still linger, adding an eerie layer to the town's history. The battlefield itself is said to be haunted by the spirits of soldiers who roam the grounds, perhaps reliving their final moments. But the ghost stories don't end there. Many shops, restaurants, and historic buildings in Perryville have their own tales of the supernatural. The Elmwood Inn, now a private residence, was once a hospital during the Civil War. The original floors, which remain to this day, are said to still bear the stains of blood from the countless soldiers treated there. Over the years, the building has also served as a school, a well-known restaurant, and a tea house, each chapter adding to its haunted reputation. The Dye House, built in 1898, still stands today, though it is currently closed to the public. There are plans to restore this historic building, and those involved in its restoration are sure to uncover more ghostly tales as they bring the home back to life. In a town like Perryville, where so much blood was shed and so many lives were lost, it's no wonder that stories of ghosts and spirits abound. Despite its haunting past, Perryville remains a charming and mysterious destination, inviting visitors to explore its historic streets and perhaps encounter a ghost or two along the way. Number 2. Devil's Point. If you live in or near Louisville, Kentucky, you've probably heard the eerie tales of Sleepy Hollow Road, a winding two-lane blacktop near the town of Prospect in Jefferson County. This road, with its tree-lined canopy that blocks out even the light of a full moon, is a favorite for those seeking a thrill. The drop-off is steep, plunging over 30 feet to the bottom in some places, making it a road best traveled with caution. The history of this area goes back to the early 19th century when settlers first arrived in this corner of northern Kentucky. However, most of the spooky stories associated with Sleepy Hollow Road are of more recent origin, likely fueled by generations of young people seeking out the dark and creepy places by car. One of the most famous legends involves a mysterious black hearse. It starts innocently enough. Headlights appear in your rearview mirror, coming up fast. At first, you might think it's the police about to pull you over, but as the car gets closer, you realize with horror that it's a hearse, its windows tinted black. The hearse pulls up beside you, and just when you think it can't get any worse, it presses sideways into your car, forcing you off the road and down the embankment. This story feels more suited to the era of automobiles than the days of horse-drawn buggies. The proximity of Harrods Creek Cemetery to the road might offer an explanation for why a hearse would be traveling this route in the first place, but it's also a convenient excuse for why a driver might find themselves at the bottom of a ravine. Another unsettling legend tells of a strange time warp experienced by some who drive through Sleepy Hollow. As they leave the valley, they find that hours have passed instead of just minutes. This could be chalked up to the disorienting effects of the road, or perhaps something more supernatural. Hearses, once their professional life is over, often end up in the hands of private owners, many of whom have a more morbid disposition than your average driver. It's not hard to imagine such a vehicle being used in eerie tales like this one. And then there's the legend of Devil's Point, an area just off Sleepy Hollow Road that was supposedly the site of satanic rituals and black masses from the 1970s to the 1980s. Residents would report hearing ominous chanting and the screams of sacrificial victims breaking the stillness of the night. Some brave souls who ventured into the woods spoke of bonfires and figures in black robes carrying on in the firelight. There, too, the eerie atmosphere and dark legends seemed to take on a life of their own, becoming intertwined with the place itself. This 1891 pale chateau-esque Victorian mansion, with its intricate details and pointed steeples, beautifully mimics the French chateaux of the era. The mansion boasts a double-arched staircase that connects all the floors, stunning Victorian designs, parquet floors, and observation windows that offer panoramic views of the surrounding area. Interestingly, this mansion didn't start out as the elegant residence it is today. Originally, it was a red brick gentleman's club and casino where locals could sit, smoke cigars, drink brandy, and chat. For those with more dubious intentions, there were upstairs rooms where they could discreetly meet with local ladies of the evening. A few years later, a southern gentleman named Avery purchased the building and turned it into a private family home. In 1910, the mansion changed hands again, and the new owners gave it its distinctive pink hue. Avery, however, decided to stay behind, even after his death. Avery's ghost is known to make rare appearances, but when he does, it's usually a sign that something bad is about to happen. He's described as a white-haired gentleman who shows up right before disaster strikes. One story tells of a woman who saw Avery's apparition while she was taking a bath. She jumped out just in time to avoid being hit by a cinder block that came crashing through the window. In another tale, Avery appeared in the kitchen moments before it caught fire due to faulty wiring. People who see him tend to flee, and in doing so, they often escape harm. While Avery's appearances might seem ominous, they actually serve as a warning that ends up saving lives. Though his ghostly presence is unsettling, Avery seems to be a protective spirit, making sure that those who see him avoid impending danger.